Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, which was originally about NASA and went through the Science and Technology Committee, has seen more than 700 pages of election law tacked onto it just late last night. If it were to become law, it would give up to $7.2 million of public funding to the campaign of each one of my colleagues, all of us. This is not about voting rights. This is about power and control. $7.2 million is more money than most Americans can even dream of having. Yet here we are considering another Democrat bill that takes public funding and doesn't give it to the American people, but puts it in the campaign coffers of members of Congress. Members who vote for this bill are voting to line their own campaign coffers, all while falsely telling the American people that we have a voting rights crisis in this country and that we must pass this bill because the era of Jim Crow 2.0 is upon us. It's the definition of corruption. Thankfully, the American people don't seem to be buying the Democrats' rhetoric. According to polling, more Americans, including independents, believe voting laws are too lax and insecure than those who believe voting laws are too restrictive. No matter how many times the president and other Democrats get up in the front of the American people and try to manufacture a voting rights crisis in this country by using rhetoric like Jim Crow 2.0, or now comparing Republicans to Democrat elected segregationists Bull Connor, as President Biden suggested this week in Georgia, there's still no evidence of widespread voter suppression. In our hearings at the House Administration Committee over the last 3 years, no one has ever produced a single voter who was eligible to vote but wasn't able to. In fact, 2020 saw the highest voter turnout in 120 years, and according to Pew, 94% of Americans say it's easy to vote. Misrepresenting and in some cases flat out lying about the laws states have passed to increase voter confidence in our elections is also part of the Democrats' playbook to manufacture a voting rights crisis. In fact, President Biden has earned 4 Pinocchios for his false claims about Georgia's voting laws. The laws these states are passing to bolster voter confidence make it easier to vote than ever before while protecting the integrity of our elections. Georgia's new, quote, voter suppression law has more days of early in-person voting than New York. And Texas's, quote, voter suppression law ends pandemic exceptions like universal drive-through voting and 24-hour voting. Neither existed in Texas before 2020. Neither widely exists even in blue states. And I think most of us can agree that nothing good can come from 24-hour drive-through voting. The bill we're considering today is not about increasing voting rights for the American people, and this is not a compromise. This bill still contains the worst provisions of H.R. 1. It still publicly funds members' campaigns. It nationalizes and centralizes our election system, makes Merrick Garland the election czar, puts unelected bureaucrats in charge of states' voting laws instead of the American people. It destroys the First Amendment, weakens states' abilities to maintain accurate voter rolls, prevents states from implementing strict voter ID laws, despite the majority of Americans supporting voter ID laws, and the list goes on and on. As terrible as those provisions are, nothing screams this bill isn't for the American people more than the fact that it gives every one of us, every member of Congress, and their own campaigns up to $7.2 million in public funding. The old saying is, follow the money. And I think that's incredibly relevant here. I reserve.